Welcome to the Build to Scale podcast. My name is Reem Benchar, your host, and today we have a special guest joining us, Francisco Martin-Rayo, CEO and co-founder of Helios Artificial Intelligence. Francisco, thank you so much for joining us today. How's your day going?
It's going great. I think we're almost at the end of the year. I think we've
I
made it.
know.
It's been really exciting for us. We're happy to be here. It's been a great year.
Good. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. I know it's the end of the year, maybe a little crazy before the holidays, so I really appreciate you making the time for this. So tell me more about yourself.
And so yeah, I'm Francisco Martin-Rayo. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Helios AI. I've got kind of a weird background, I would say. Before starting Helios, I was running digital transformations at BCG. I'd run a couple AI businesses, and a long time ago, I'd actually imported avocados from Mexico. Between my co-founder and I, we're some of the few people in the AI space that both understand ag and food and also AI.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely an interesting background. Probably the most interesting one I've heard so far between importing avocados and working digital transformation. So I'm sure that's helped give you the right skill set and experience to build the company you co-founded.
Sure. I mean, there's not a lot of overlap yet, but maybe the next company is how AI can produce better tasting avocados. We'll see, right?
That sounds great. Cool. Well, tell me more about Helios AI. What do you
So
guys do there?
yeah, Helios AI, we've been around for a little over 2 years now, and at its core, we've basically built the world's best climate risk platform to predict agricultural disruptions and kind of the price of commodities. And if that sounds kind of really complicated, really what we do is we work with hedge funds and then procurement leaders in the commodity space, your retailers, your supermarkets, your food CPGs, and we help them identify like where are the risks in your supply chain? Where do we think the prices are going to go up significantly before they do? So you can save some money by buying long or maybe waiting a little bit to buy. And then also really helping you understand how is climate impacting your supply chain overall? Where are the places that you think you'll need to move away from? Where are some places where we think it's actually going to be really positive and you can start to double down?
Very cool. And are there other companies that do something similar? Because I feel like it's probably a little bit more on the unique side, but definitely understand the need for it.
Yeah, it's been so fascinating to be in the space. I think there's obviously a huge business that does things like commodity insights. Multi-billion-dollar business a year. You've got kind of really good companies like an S&P Global that does it. Kind of more legacy partners, typically private equity owned, that are less exciting. What's been really interesting about the space is, for decades, you didn't really have to worry about climate. And so, if you were kind of a procurement manager, a technical manager, what you really had to worry about is, can I trust the people I'm sourcing from? Are they honest? Are they going to do the right regulations? Are they going to deliver on time and on price? And then you would spend most of your time building out those relationships, managing those relationships. What's happened now is, even if you've got these wonderful long-term relationships around the world, climate doesn't care. And so there were places that you used to be able to source from for years that are now having pretty serious disruptions. And the way you're seeing that kind of impact is you're seeing tremendous price volatility and you're seeing agricultural disruptions. And so if you're procurement manager, your biggest fear is that you're not going to have kind of that particular, food or ingredient on the table or on the shelf. And that's starting to happen now.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like from your perspective, since you have probably extensive knowledge about that, how disruptive has the climate been when it comes to pricing and supply chain in the past few years versus the past decades?
It's such a good question. It's been brutal. No one likes to invite us to the cocktail parties anymore because they ask us what we do, and we tell them, and they ask, well, how do you think it's going to go? I think, well, we think it's going terribly.
Uh,
Just tidbits. It used to be, right, when the Paris Agreement happened, we were expecting temperature increases of 1.5 degrees centigrade on average. We're now closer to 2.7 degrees centigrade, almost double. So we're not only are we not flattening the curve, we're seeing it almost have this extraordinary increase, if you will. And you're starting to see those impacts. From June 2023 until September 2024, every month hit a heat record. And so you're really starting to see this extraordinary acceleration of natural disasters, but also kind of climate weirding. So it's not just that the average temperature is getting warmer, but in some places you have much colder temperatures than before. In some places you have a lot more precipitation, a lot less precipitation. And so that's really wreaking havoc with kind of the food supply chain globally. And it's only going to get worse.
Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I have a positive, addendum to that if that's helpful. So not everybody gets too depressed. On the positive side, I will say, listen, we're past the point of being able to bend the curve, right? And I think one of our criticisms of your Davos and your Climate Week and all that is that people spend 94% of the resources, time, energy, et cetera, on this idea of bending the curve and reducing greenhouse gases and all that stuff. And we think that's really important, but we have absolutely failed. We need to start thinking much more intelligently about adaptation. What can we do to survive and thrive in a world that is 3 degrees centigrade warmer on average? And that's one of the places where artificial intelligence makes a huge difference. Even 2, 3 years ago, I mean, we have 500 billion data points in our platform that helps us understand how is climate impacting 60 plus different global supply chains per commodity across 85 countries. That would have been impossible to do 2 or 3 years ago. And so there really is this unique moment where, despite how overwhelming and frightening our global challenges are, you are starting to see the ability to use some of these new technology and the tools that are becoming available to mitigate some of those risks. And that we find both hopeful and exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely a more optimistic way of approaching this. But that's amazing. You guys are, I feel like you're kind of, the only words that come to mind is that you're helping save the world. I mean, this is pretty cool in terms of how you can turn such a tragic situation that is only getting worse into something that's salvageable and helping everybody get fed, basically. That's kind of how I see it.
I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, that is our ethos. At the end of the day, is the better we can help these leaders, not just in private sector companies, but also in the public sector, manage these disruptions. The less food insecurity you'll have, the fewer kind of crop failures and disruptions you'll have, which means fewer people have to go hungry, and hopefully you can spend a little bit less of your budget on your total grocery spend. There's an interesting, the Potsdam Institute just came out with this fascinating report that says they expect 3 to 3.5% inflation price increases in food over the next 10 years because of climate change. And so our job is really to help bend that curve, right? Maybe we get to 1%, or maybe we can knock out the impact if we just get to scale.
That's awesome. How's scaling going for you? Because I feel like this is a massive market, right? What are your plans, and what does that look like for the near future?
It's been a wonderful year. I think one of the best pieces of advice I received was that it's always a privilege to be able to kind of run and work at a startup that is growing, and so I take that to task and really kind of keep that front of mind and enjoy that as much as possible. But your company, if it is growing, right, it'll change every 6-ish months. And so the problems that we were facing 2 years ago are now small comparison to problems we're facing now. And I'm sure 2 years from now we'll go, God, I wish we still had those problems, right? The problems are so much bigger.
Yeah, definitely very common for startups as they grow. But congrats on growing, and I know it's exciting. It's a lot of work, but the mission you guys have is really great. More just better impact on the world. So I love that.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Great. So let's dive maybe a little bit more into like the bigger trends you're seeing in your space. What are you seeing that's kind of worth noting?
Artificial intelligence generally, I mean, it has just been such an exceptional 2 years. We're so excited for the next 2 to 4 years, not just for Helios, right, but for humanity at large. I think what we're really excited to see in 2025 is almost the mass production and adoption, hopefully, of what we call AI agents. And so for the folks that are listening to this podcast that might not have the technical background, an AI agent is basically a combination of AI tools that can do relatively complex human tasks. And so a good example would be, let's say you're a company that sells a lot of French fries around the world. And you look at your total supply chain and you're looking at some potatoes and onions and tomatoes, all that stuff. You would be able to immediately understand where are the places that are highest risk, where the price is going to go up, or I might not be able to source my potatoes, tomatoes, onions, etc. anymore. Where are the places that are going to have a really good season that should be able to source more from? And then can I get some quotes from suppliers in that region? And all of that an AI agent can do in minutes, and then bring it to the senior leader and say, here's the options, here's where we recommend you move forward. That's something that would have taken, weeks or months before for these procurement teams to do, which in fairness to them are very lean. I mean, it's probably the leanest team we've ever seen at these Fortune 500s. But that's something that, will really free up your time, where you can actually give these multi-step, highly complex tasks that it used to take humans a long time to do, and have an AI agent do it for you.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of the big predictions we're seeing for next year. More and more companies adopting AI agents to do simple to complex tasks. So is this something you help build or offer at Helios?
Yeah. That'll definitely be a 2025 launch. One of the most interesting things we did in October 2023, we launched Cersei, and it was our, the first like virtual supply chain analyst in the market. And it was awesome. And you could ask her questions like, what are the biggest risks in my supply chain? What's the impact of El Nino? So we launched it to market. We got a lot of press, and people hated it. And then we went back to our customers. Why do you hate it so much? I said, well, we don't want to go in there and ask the same questions to this chatbot, analyst. Is there a way where you can just send us the reports in our inbox? And listen, we are here for our customers. We are very customer centric. We said, absolutely. So it is, we put her in the back end, and now she generates thousands of reports every week that are, hyper custom, and they can, they go to each of our customers. But what was interesting is, even though the technology has evolved so dramatically, the ways of working haven't necessarily evolved that much. And so you've got this incredible platform that can generate these, specific insights and reports. And the way we are still ingesting it is by sending it to our customers' inboxes.
That's really interesting. Do you feel like, and I don't know if it's specifically in your field or line of work that we're seeing more of that, but do you feel like companies are ready to use AI agents, or do you feel like maybe the adoption is going to take a little bit long?
It's a really good question. I think, it varies a lot, and I think it'll depend partly on what are the needs of the company and where do you see the biggest risk? How much are your teams getting squeezed? And so I think in an area where you're seeing a lot of disruption, you don't have the budget to hire, 1.5, 2x the number of FTEs. I think that's somewhere where you'll just have to bring an AI to help. I think in other areas where you're not seeing that level of disruption or that need, I think there you're more likely to be able to say, well, we're going to start using it at the margins, but we don't need a transformation.
That makes sense. Cool. So can you tell me a little bit more about maybe how you're envisioning AI maybe impacting society? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's the best way to think about it is think of it as a natural curve, right? So you've got the bulk of, if you looked at your natural curve, and let's assume it's the types of jobs that exist. So at one end, you'll have jobs that are easily automatable, but are relatively low wage jobs, like folding towels, for example. That's something you can use a robot to do, but it's actually very expensive, and you can pay someone minimum wage to do it, and they will do it. And so those jobs are probably not going to be impacted. And then at the other end, you've got jobs like neurosurgeons, really experienced data scientists, not your average data scientist. We'll talk about that in a second. Those people are going to work with AI, and they're going to do very well. And so you're going to see the kind of this explosion of productivity and wages and all that gain in this, in the most elite type professions that require a lot of expertise. And then you've got the heavy middle. And that's what I really worry about as a human and as an American, where, we don't hire brand new data scientists, because a lot of the work that a brand new data scientist would do, Copilot does for us now. Those jobs that exist in your back end around HR and finance and ops, SDRs, and SDR is a sales development representative. That whole job was to reach out to people and try to get meetings. That job has disappeared. It's purely AI now. And I think those are the places where we really worry about, right? How do we support, because these are really good, proper middle-class jobs. How do we support the fat middle that really underpins our economic growth, our society, and support them through that transition?
Yeah, that's a really good point you're bringing up. And I ask myself the same question because, when it comes to adopting AI, there's so many perks, and, we save so much time, and we can be really cost effective, especially as a company owner or founder. But at the same time, we do see risks, especially when it comes to maybe replacing a lot of these jobs in the middle class. And what does that impact look like in the future? We don't want people to lose their jobs and, impact the economy that way. But at the same time, unfortunately, we are kind of heading in that direction. There's excitement, but there's also a little bit of, we're a little worried or terrified for some of these some of the impact it's going to have on the society as a whole.
Yeah, completely agree. We're quite close to the global chief investment officer of one of the largest mutual funds companies in America. And it was interesting because their entire leadership team, they've been there for 20, 30 years, had all gone through this junior rotational program. And the junior rotational program was, you would spend 2 years, you'd rotate around, you'd be kind of a generalist. You're 22, your skill sets are relatively minimal, but you would learn about the business and you would build your relationships and then you would go on. They cut that program. It doesn't exist anymore because all of the things that the 22-year-olds would do are now automated. And so where is your group of 50 to 100 22-year-olds in a rotational program that are going to be your next leaders? Well, they're not there anymore. Even to your point, that's something that's going to hit us, I think, in the medium term, if not a little early.
For sure. And we're already seeing a lot of that when it comes to engineers, for example, software engineers. I mean, different stories from a lot of them struggling to find a job today to companies not hiring engineers anymore software engineers, because they can use their AI to write code, for example. And then you see all these soon to be software engineers in college and you're thinking, well, what's going to happen, right? How can they actually adapt to this new market and different needs? So definitely a lot to think about.
Yeah. 25% of the code that Google is shipping is written by AI. 25%. It's Google. I mean, you can imagine the sheer amount of code that it's shipping out.
That's massive. That's incredible. So what are some challenges you feel have been more prominent this year as a founder, right, of your company? I know you've experienced growth, which is really exciting, but what have been some challenges you feel are interesting to share?
I think with growth, it means that you as a CEO and my co-founder Eden as a CTO, you have to grow with the company. And your leadership team and the rest of your team also has to grow with the company. I think that's probably the hardest part of having the ability and the luck to scale anything, is that you start to feel that the strain as a leader, right? The things that you were doing really well a year ago are no longer relevant, right? And you need to build a different skill set. How do you morph an organization? For a long time, I came from, at BCG, you would do organizational transformations, and we had these wonderful role charters and, what's the right operational framework and where do you move the boxes and all that. And that's completely irrelevant in a startup because you really are, our product roadmap is so informed by our customers that we will launch something and get a ton of feedback. And then that informs what are the next features we're going to launch, what does the market look like, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're constantly asking your team to stretch in new ways and then helping them find that balance, right? I think it's easy, especially for your rock stars, to say, you've been working 80 hours a week. We got this push. We have another push we need to do. Go work another 80 hours a week for the next few weeks. And it gets to the point where your rock stars will say, I need a break. I can't keep working for another 80 hours a week for 3 months, right? I've been doing it for 4 months.
Yeah, it's a good point you're bringing up. And, hiring talent and retaining talent, that's a whole other discussion we can have. Yeah, definitely. It's maybe balancing sustaining such a fast growth and at the same time making sure your rock stars are happy and are getting what they need to stick around and perform.
Yeah. Well, and I think there, a lot of what matters is who are you hiring, who are you firing. I think that's also really important because if 80% of your team is working really hard and 20% is not, that's really demotivating for the 80%. Who are you rewarding with extra, salaries, bonuses, options, right? And how are you doing that publicly? What are you talking about in meetings? How does that change? How are you spending your time? What are you measuring? All those things really help to build the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And then what are some big initiatives or priorities you have for the company for next year that you can share with us?
We've got a very large partnership we will be able to announce in Q1, which we're very excited about. My team pushes back on this, and we're a relatively flat organization, so that pushback means a lot. My hope is, we launched Cersei October 2023. The market wasn't ready for it. I am so excited to be able to kind of launch a better and more complete version of that, generate reports for you, generate new insights, all that stuff with even more information. Do that at some point, right? I think we're talking with our customers. We're going to bring them along, but I would love for us to get to that point where you really see Helios as it is your ultimate, commodity analyst. And the teams are so lean, it's never going to replace your procurement teams. But you imagine how powerful it would be to say, God, I've got this rock star analyst with me that works 24 hours a day, knows everything about everything, and I can ask for all these different insights and reports and all that. That's where we're going to get to.
It's exciting. I feel like you're almost reshaping an industry that's maybe like that used to be really traditional in terms of how they get their information, how much information they can even get, to something that's revolutionary and very innovative. So that's really, really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It was amazing. We have customers who will do multi-million-dollar deals over WhatsApp. That's not, I'll just say, hey, can I get whatever X number of tons of X or Y? Sure. And that's the contract, right? I mean, and in fairness to the industry, it is so trust dependent, right? You need to trust those relationships, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a small world, but it's a relatively small world where your reputation is everything. But I think that has been a reason for them not to more actively engage, I would say, with technology, especially something that could make their life easier.
For sure. That makes sense. That's really exciting.
It is.
Cool. So before we wrap up, if anyone wants to learn more about what you guys do at Helios AI, what is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, honestly, you can just email me. It's f@helios.sc for supply chain. That's also our website, helios.sc for supply chain, or just Google us, Helios Artificial Intelligence, and we'll be the first thing that pops up.
Awesome. I'll have these linked with your website in the description of the podcast. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining today. I hope this was valuable. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anybody else who might find it interesting. And Francisco, thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. You guys are doing awesome things at Helios AI, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys are going to build in the next few years.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for having us.